Hello and welcome to the Middle-earth in Mercia podcast, episode 14, Ash, from Brush, the Battlefields. Hello everyone and welcome back. This is the Middle-earth in Mercia podcast. I'm once again your host Sonny, and I'm here back today with my co-host Ash. Say hello, Ash.
Hi everyone.
And a man of a few words as usual. As you've been aware, he's had a bit of a hiatus, which has just been like mainly our clash in schedules. We haven't fallen out or anything. We're still doing our best to meet up for games and having a bit of a chat about the hobby. We've become a little bit of sidetracked with Kill Team and 40k of late. But yeah, we've found an afternoon and we've decided to meet up and do a bit of a recap of Ash's year in hobby and get him involved in some of the conversations we've been having with you all. So I guess the first thing, Ash, is what's your hobby status? Have you been doing any Lord of the Rings, or you've been focusing on other things?
So yeah, mainly been focusing on the 40k Kill Team stuff. So I haven't really touched any Middle-earth stuff since I finished my Riders of Fear and Army off. So probably looking into the new year, start looking at new armies, maybe build up a new army for this year's tournament scenes, and hopefully have a better look with that new army.
And how are you finding that? Because I found stepping away and doing different models which, although they're technically the same scale, they are a different scale, aren't they?
Yeah, I think Space Marines is what I'm painting a lot of at the minute. And they just take so much longer to paint than the Middle-earth models, because you can't quite use contrast paint methods, so you can't speed paint them as effectively. And then you've got to do all the lines and the layering and stuff. So it's quite tedious because they're all the same, whereas with Middle-earth you don't really need to have them all matching like you would in a Space Marine unit. But yeah, it's taken a bit longer to paint those than to get an army ready, so that's taken up all my time.
Are you feeling a bit refreshed to come back to Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Now we've tried 40k and we enjoy it, and we've sort of settled into the rules a bit, we can start mixing up, playing different games each time we meet. We're not having to put our energy in learning those rule sets. Yeah,
I've got to say, doing army after army and getting a full collection and competitive play, I do think that is Lord of the Rings for me. But I do like having a wheelhouse I can rotate around. I find it refreshing. I not to put people down, I find it impressive that people have that level of dedication that they can do Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings constantly. But I don't find I'm one of those people.
Yeah, I think sometimes a change is better than a rest. It's good to just switch it up a bit. And yeah, I was telling you earlier, I've just got all my 40k models out of the boxes, and it's just my display cabinet looks like a pile of grey shame. So just got to get those painted. It just the time factor. It takes so long to paint one unit compared to probably painting a whole army in the time I've taken to paint a 5-man unit of Space Marines. So it's good to have a refresh. But yeah, looking into the new year, probably do a new army and at least get a new army up and running so that I can just focus on painting 40k and playing Middle-earth.
So before we move on to sort of the year ahead and plans, I guess what I think would be interesting for the listeners, because they've obviously heard my journey, which is I'm sort of into year 3 or year 2.5, depending on where you want to count it from. But for you, this was almost like a true fresh start for you for the year. So, I mean, at the beginning of the year, you didn't have a fully painted army, did you?
I did, because we played our first tournament around this time last year.
Oh, okay, in the January. But
yeah.
Okay, but preceding it,
that
was your first.
I got back off my holiday and had about 15 Royal Guard to paint when I got back. So within the space of a week. So yeah, it wasn't until that tournament I had my first ever fully painted army in any any game setting.
Yes, which
is a running joke that we had, wasn't it?
Which is a big change for you.
Yeah.
So we can really take you from that fresh point, and I think, like, the podcast has always been the intent, at least, and like, you know, maybe down the road when we're more experienced players, it becomes something else. But in these first few seasons, has been for people new to the hobby and looking to get into it. Like, it doesn't mean people who aren't experienced hands can't listen to us, but that's something I've always wanted to explore, because we've always wanted to encourage people to go to tournaments. So let's delve into that then. Your year in review of tournament playing and Lord of the Rings. I guess maybe the logical. Let's think. So let's do an old classic. You know, what's been your best moment, hobby moment of the year, and what's been your worst?
I think my best moment, obviously, was the first win. That came in a tournament where I finished 5th, which was nice. It took me a while to get over that hurdle of getting that first sort of win. I got a draw, but it didn't feel quite the same as getting a win. So definitely getting over that hurdle of a win then unlocked a few more wins. And as I played my list more and more in the tournaments against different lists, I sort of understood its strengths and weaknesses a lot better.
I think the fact it did take you a little while, which I think is a valuable lesson for those of you who are looking to start out or are starting out and maybe don't have that first win, is it did drag you down a bit, didn't it? But yeah. I said to you, it was going to come. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and I think my advice for someone would be pick a list that's got variety and not... My list obviously is very heavily cavalry focused. Doesn't have a lot of variety. It's very much hammer and anvil style play. There's not a lot of shooting in it. There's not a lot of abilities magic wise.
You do have a fair amount of shooting, to be fair.
Yeah, I guess, but it's.
I get what you mean.
You have to sacrifice a bit of your manoeuvrability so you can shoot, obviously, and then the throwing spears obviously very, very lethal. But you have to get within that distance. If you come up against certain lists, you sort of get a bash back a bit because you can't get within that range if you've got a cavalry list that you're facing. Cavalry versus cavalry, it tends to fall apart a bit because you can't get within 9, throw a few spears for a few rounds and then charge in after you've sort of weakened their numbers. And I think it's very position based as well. If you get in the wrong position and you lose that roll off and you don't have the chance to do a heroic move.
It can be very all or nothing.
Yeah, it can be a very all or nothing, and you don't have very strong leader. I think Theoden is a great leader. He gives a lot of buffs, but he doesn't give you that strength factor that if you get him in the wrong place, you could lose him pretty easily.
I do sort of view your army as a bit... Maybe it's not the perfect analogy in terms of it is a very broad attack, but sort of like a scalpel when you're opening a cardboard box, like a package you've got. If you approach that package cutting it open with a scalpel in the wrong way, you could very easily break the blade. And yeah, there are a couple of ways you can cut the tape or whatever, but it's not an axe, is it? Where no matter how you swing it, you're getting into that box. You can do it very efficiently and you can do it in an excellent manner. But it is a skill. It is a highly skilled list, I think.
Yeah, it's very, like I said, position based. If you get in the wrong position, it's very hard to get out of that position quick enough to not get punished by your opponent.
So that's your highest moment, the win. Which I remember when me and Chris went to doubles at Warhammer World, getting our first win. I was super giddy. Because it's almost like a confirmation of the practice you've put in at home, like a bit of imposter syndrome really, but you're not in a position yet in that confirmation of, I do actually have some talent. I am actually capable of beating someone that's not my mate.
Yeah. And I think that day it just seemed to all link together, and I lost the first game. And I always seem to get my first game against someone, they take their hoodie off or something and they've got a GB England top on. And I'm like, okay, here we go again. And so I lost that first game, but then I won the second, and then the third, and then the fourth. So it was like a domino effect. As soon as I got over that mental barrier, I then finished on quite a strong tournament.
As I recall, you did better than me.
Yeah, I did.
And you got 5th. So not that I'm the benchmark, but traditionally in games, Ash has had a hard time against me. So doing better than me, which I think that's the first and only time you did better, and getting your first win, an excellent day. So that's an understandable high for you. What about a low? And maybe it's not a single moment, but what's been most challenging, or,
I think a low for me is getting cheated out of easy rules that I should have remembered myself. And people saying, no, you don't play it that way, you play it this way, and not having that confidence to say to the TO, can you come over and just give a ruling on this? Yeah. I think that was my low, because there were so many times in games where that turned the tide, and then I just left the game with a bit of a bitter feeling, and even compared to, I got a wooden spoon at one of the tournaments, but even then that wasn't a low point compared to that feeling of being cheated out of a game, because you sort of get taken advantage of sometimes as a newbie.
Yeah, I want to delve into this on a topic a little bit later on in the podcast, but just for some context here, I do think there's by cheated, I think Ash means you can cheat yourself out, the other player can cheat you out. There's many different reasons rules can be interpreted wrong. Sometimes you've got somebody that's willfully playing a rule wrong, and they are few and far between. I think what is more common is people accidentally playing a rule incorrectly, and inexperience of both players leading to that being accepted. And I think that one particularly is a hard pill to swallow. I've done that, and it's something that I've spoken about before, of if in doubt, do just ask to see the rules pack. Do just ask to see the rule book. Do just ask the TO to come over. Because that is a really glum feeling. And I'm still doing that. Not last tournament, but the tournament before. I'm getting up into reasonable numbers of tournaments, and I still did that. And it's hard to overcome, because you don't want to feel like, I'm being difficult, or I'm accusing this person of cheating, because it's not always that. Sometimes it's just, look, I don't know this rule out and out, and I'd like to make sure it's correct. And I do think it's over politeness, and we need to get over it, and accepting players not going to have a problem with that.
Yeah, and I think as a newbie, you feel a bit like, this guy obviously played quite a few games before. He knows the rules. I'll just go on what he says, when instead of trusting your gut, sort of thing. I think one that stood out to me, and we'll go into it in more detail later, is someone took out my banner in the first round of shooting because they said they had line of sight, because my horses weren't blocking the line of sight, even though my bases were. And I guess that could be interpreted as, you do have line of sight, but we've always played it, if the base is in the way, then...
Well, it's the model, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which, from the way you described to me, it was very unlikely the model's not in the way. And I have had to think about that, particularly because of who that player was, and it's somebody that is jostling for position in the GBHL. I don't think they cheated you out of a game, but the more I think about it, I think they were trying to game for VPs.
Yeah.
Because I think particularly at that high level, and I do think this is one of the things that maybe does drive people that are on the competitive end to maybe do things that are questionable, that they maybe wouldn't ordinarily do in a game against their mate, is that they're, when you've got 40 people or 60 people all jostling for the top 5 positions, VPs are so important. And we'll get onto that more.
Yeah, but, in the tournaments, because they're based on that VP amount.
Yeah.
If you've got someone who wins 4 games and it ends up on the VP amount, I can imagine the VPs really do count when you're at that top.
Yeah, and even at less competitive ones, like when I got second at Grantham, I got that on VPs. If I'd got less VPs, I would have come third.
Yeah.
If I'd got more VPs, I would have come first. Right. So that's your highs and lows. We are going to get on to the fair play discussion later on, because I think that is, for your year in review in your first year, like, you guys have all heard me talk about it a lot, but I think Ash has got this really, well, I guess not unique perspective, but it's a unique moment in time for you, isn't it? Your first year.
Yeah.
And I think particularly for our listener base, that's interesting. So that's your highs and lows. Any like, we've gone on maybe a downside. Any moments of like games that really leap out to you, cool moments you can remember? Like, maybe it wasn't a game you walked away from winning, but just like, oh, that was really cool. Those kind of things that got us into wargaming.
I've had a couple of games where it's just been like the opponent, you've seemed to gel with them, you get on well with them, and you're both just laughing and just getting really into the game. And I think it was in the last tournament we went to, my last game, and it was just like so back and forth. Like he would do something that would like annihilate like something quite quickly, or I would do something, and it was like dice. When your dice rolls are like you're needing certain dice rolls and they're not quite coming out, or they're coming out, and I think that sort of thing, when you get an opponent that you gel with, you can really just settle in and enjoy the game and play it how it's sort of meant to be played.
Yeah, I've always said I do think wargaming, because it's not chess. Like, with chess you've got a knight. You know exactly what a knight can do, and we do have rules. But then we've got unusual bits of terrain. You've got people using different measuring equipment. You've got people translating it from a different language. There needs to be a spirit of goodwill in this game, doesn't there? And of playing the rules as intended.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. Even when you're on like a losing streak, like God, I had some bad tournaments towards the end of the year where I was really questioning my progress in the game. But when you've got an opponent who can be like, yeah, that was unlucky, man. I'm there with you. That was unlucky. It makes it better rather than, like somebody gloating for...
Yeah, it's things like people like big heroes failing courage tests, or you need like times. A 3 and you end up rolling a 1 or something, and they get a bit gloaty about it, and it just gives you a bit of a bad taste. Whereas when they're like, oh, that's unlucky, or even like the vice versa, when you do something really well and they're not like sour about something good happening for you. I think, when you get a good opponent, it does really make their game enjoyable. And I would say 8 times out of 10 I've had good opponents. Yeah.
I mean, that we always circle back round to that when we offer a negative, is that we aren't, I don't think we're negative people, and I don't think we have a negative opinion of the game or anything. We're just trying to offer a balance. When you praise something, when you say something is good, that praise is only really worthwhile because you're willing to point out what is bad. And we've all got that friend. I mean, maybe that friend is sat with me now where, there's some things you don't like about them. But on the whole, they're a good friend.
I think you get rid of friends that you don't like. So.
Oh, I'm still here, Ash. You haven't done it very well. What next? Favourite tournament? Did you have a favourite tournament this year?
It's a tough one. I think it's biased because I did quite well in it, but I think the one at Board in Brum was quite a good one because Board in Brum, the sort of board setup was quite good. It wasn't too theme based, but it was also quite set up for like wargaming and quite immersive. It made the game feel a bit more immersive. It wasn't just like someone had stuck random buildings here and there.
Yeah.
And probably the last one was quite a good one, I think.
What was that?
The one in
was that
Wickham?
Tom's one in High Wycombe? Yeah, I've just done not long ago done the tournament review on that. I think that was probably although in terms of like enjoyment of like, oh, this was my happiest moment, it's got to be Grantham.
Yeah.
Because that was high. But in terms of the best tournament I went to, I think that probably was the best tournament of the year.
Yeah.
I won't go over it again, but in my review, it was just like, it struck all the right notes. It was affordable, good tables, comfortable place, good facilities, good parking. You've got to really be reaching to the, like, get your tickets now. This is unbelievable to do better than that. I think it got some. I think I gave it something like an 8.4 or 8.5 out of 10. It did pretty well.
Yeah, I think if you get a good setup, like in a good game store, in a town centre location, with good scenery, where people of the community do support a lot, I think, with scenery as well, don't they, for these things? And obviously the game stores do. If you get that level, then, and a good TO, you get a good tournament out of it. It's when you're playing on like a board that doesn't even have like a mat down, it's just a piece of MDF. That's it,
which
even though it's fun playing the game, it's just you don't have that immersive feel that is meant to be there with wargaming.
Yeah, which is few and far between. I think that only happened at maybe one.
I think.
And in general, I think it is a rule of the GBHL that everything must be terrained. I think in that instance, it was just something fell through in terms of the planning. But okay. So now one of the things that I sort of pointed out in my first year that I thought was really good was, and I'm talking not in terms of like Facebook and the internet and things we've read, but the community and people that you meet. I felt that was a really big positive in my first year, because like I tend to get on with people most places I go.
It's news.
But shut up. But I was a little bit apprehensive because although I tend to be decent in social situations, it's like one of those things I forced myself to learn. If I were to say what is one of the things I hate doing, it's going to a room full of people that have all got their own cliques and things and meeting them. I am always apprehensive about that, and I have to make myself do it. I think the same is probably true for yourself.
I always think I'm more comfortable presenting to like 1,000 people than I am speaking to people sort of one-on-one. So that was a bit of a apprehension to me, is that meeting new people, obviously meeting experienced people within the game. And tournaments and things, especially with 40k, they get a bit of a bad rap for being quite sweaty. But so far I haven't really found that. That was a big apprehension, is meeting those new people and talking to people, because I'm not the most socially adapt sort of person.
We think he's undiagnosed.
In the end, you just settle in, don't you? And as you start because the scene's quite small on terms of scale of other scenes. You sort of start seeing the same faces, and you have a catch up when you go. And
there's like a local, regional, and then national, isn't there? Like if you go to the GBHL 100, you're probably going to see the people chasing the league. If you go to your local 90, you're probably going to see your local competitive players. And if you go to an 80, you're probably going to see people mostly from that specific region, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think one thing I learned over the year is 80s and 90s are more enjoyable. I think the 100 is where you start to get that clickiness, because you're getting some of the top players who all seem to click together, and it's more of that. There's more of a competitive feel to the 100s than I've found at the 80 and the 90. Definitely.
We've only been to 100, and I haven't gotten around to doing the tournament review yet on that. But we had. I came away with a bit of success, which I won't go into in case I manage to get the tournament review done. So it wasn't like it was, lose, lose, lose. But the lists are certainly very different. There's a lot more negative experience lists. I think that makes a big difference.
I think I had quite a negative experience at the tournament as well.
Yeah.
Which probably put a damper on it for me.
Save that to later.
I'll save that to later, yeah.
But I played, what's his name, of Bear Gaming?
James.
I played James. lovely bloke. I would count him as a personal friend. I played his list to that GBHL 100. I love playing against James. I'm hoping we can organise a social game, doubles. It's something I'm talking to them about with soon. He's a great bloke. Enjoyed playing him. There was nothing negative he added to the game. But oh my god, playing his Assault on Helm's Deep was one of the worst enjoyment games I've ever played. So that just sort of shows that if someone is playing a negative experience list and you are unlucky on the scenario, you can be playing someone that you love playing against and still have a really bad time.
Yeah, because we won't go into the detail of it. But I ended up playing that list 3 times on that weekend. I played James once and another bloke twice.
Yeah.
And, when it all prevailed, it turned out I wasn't even meant to play Assault on Helm's Deep the first time, but we'll cover that in more detail later. But I played that list 3 times against the cavalry list. Yeah. And it was just...
It's a lot. I would put the other side of the coin in there, in that I played probably the most talented player I've played all year, just based on past experience, Alistair King at that event, who I believe he's part of the GBHL executive. He's tried to win the league before. I don't know whether he has won or not. He might have, but he's won a lot of games. He's placed really well, and he was one of the nicest people I played all year. He was playing Host of the Dragon Emperor, so a competitive list, but one that I feel comfortable against. And we had a really good game. I did lose in the end, but I gave him a good showing, and he was nice as pie. So, there's more than one figure that makes up the formula. There's the player, there's the intent of the player, there's the goodwill in the game, and then there's also the list they're bringing. So just a bit of balance there. He was really nice to play against. I had a great time. So we've talked about sort of people. So on the whole, you would say it was a positive experience.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it, and it's playing more games, so you can't complain.
Yeah.
You get 4 games in a weekend when you struggle sometimes, and it's that forcing you to put that date in to play games. So I think that side is positive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think everybody you walk up to is like, oh, we should be friends and you got to come chat with us. People do tend to go back to their groups and stuff like that. But I would say there's a higher proportion of people that are open to being friendly and, being like, oh, I saw you at that tournament, and, catching up. Do you get what I'm saying? It's not like everybody you meet is like, let's exchange numbers. But I do think there is a higher proportion of people at tournaments that are looking to make friends and make connections and things like that, which I think is nice.
Yeah, and I think people comment on your painting of your list if you've got a well painted list. People will say, "Oh, that looks cool. How did you paint that?" and stuff. And it just opens up conversations with new people. And even on that side of things, you learn people's techniques of painting or basing their models and stuff. Yeah.
I've certainly seen some stuff that I've taken home and been like, "Oh, look into that."
And I think it's always good to see. I'm very much like I have to paint something to make it look like the box or to make it look like it should in the film. And it's always interesting to me to see people who've taken their own take on it and just gone with their own colour scheme. I don't know why I've got that problem. I just like to have it. To me, it adds to the feel of the game if it looks like it should.
I'm not all that way. Like my Haradim, I've shifted them a bit because I wanted some more colour. And for me, I sort of go to the books. And if the book says, in the books, it makes a real big deal about them using rich fabrics and having bright colours. So I was like, okay, that gives me permission to add in some purples. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. Okay, so we've spoken about the tournaments quite a bit, people at the tournaments. There's one more topic I want to touch on before we sort of move on to you as a player. And that is, the GBHL has basically been, your nursery, as it were, your introduction to the tournament scene. What do you think of the GBHL? Do you think it's I got my opinions and I'm going to share them afterwards. So don't let me make it out like I'm leading you. Do you think it's a force for good? Do you think the organisation helps? Do you think it creates standardisation? Do you feel more confident going to an event when it's ran by the GBHL? And would you encourage people to do the same as what you've done this year?
I'm not too sure. I haven't really felt the effects I don't think of having the GBHL there, because I don't think I've been to any like non-GBHL sort of tournaments, so I couldn't really comment on whether it makes it better or not. Obviously, having a standard approach is quite good, but I think even then, we've been to some tournaments where the positions are based on one way, and we've been to another tournament where the positions are based on another. We've been to a tournament where it's dice down at the end. As soon as the timer finishes, that's it, dice down.
Yeah,
we've been finished the rules. We've been where the time finishes, it's finished that turn. So it's standardised in a way, but it's still not standardised where every tournament you go to is. When the timer finishes, it's dice down. And a bit like, I think in 40k, they sort of use chess clocks. So you've got a set time and that's how you work out the time limit. Whereas in the GBHL, they don't seem to have a standard way of finishing a game.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, if we were to look on paper, what the GBHL offers is they have to offer a rules pack. There has to be terrain on the tables. And please, people, write into the email address if I'm missing something out here, because I don't want to underplay the contribution. Yeah, it has to have terrain on the tables. You have to have like first, second, third with some sort of presentation. There's limits and minimums, I think, on the cost of the tournament. They have to do a slight sub to the GBHL. There's obviously the allocation of points. And if anything were to go drastically wrong at the tournament, it gives you access to the GBHL complaints procedure so that they could, if in exceptional circumstances, possibly sanction a player or even a TO if they didn't do things. And I think the general idea is also if you go to a GBHL 100, they've hosted an 80 or a 90 before, they've got some experience, whereas someone doing an 80 maybe is fresh to the scene.
Okay.
So yeah, I think, I mean, for me, I get what you're saying, but there's some things where it feels like there should be standardization, but it's almost like a, like a federal system, isn't it? Where, okay, we're the GBHL, we've got like these 10 rules you have to abide to, but the states' rights, TOs, have got free play on like a lot of things, which has its ups and downs. I think it is really good when someone's come up with a really unique rules pack. But I also get that, it is, especially when they've not been explicit. I think the ending of a game one is one that frequently comes up. Like I've heard so many players talk about, I got caught out because the TO's interpretation of when the game should end was different from mine. That is something.
Yeah, I think, and it's like, in those cases, I've heard people have been robbed of winning a tournament because they've had 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
And 2 minutes is like, you don't really realistically want to start a new turn, but then you've been told, you have to start a new turn because the time's not up. So I think, having that clarification would be good. I think as an outsider looking in sometimes, I think it's interesting to see who sort of feeds into the GBHL. And sometimes it seems, obviously we've had that scandal Ardacon, and I expected more of a response around it from them. But yeah, we've covered that in quite a lot of depth, and I don't think we need to hash over that old ground again. But I don't really feel their effects because I've not been to a non-GBHL tournament to comment on if it's worse or if it's better. Yeah,
we're not going over that specific incident again, but we'll get on to that kind of topic about rules enforcement later on. It is something I do want to talk to you about and your feeling as a fresh player, because, I've been in, I've got people I've spoken to, and I've formed opinions over the last 2 years. Yours are fresh, and I do think here's a genuine fresh player with no biases. What do they think? I think that's something interesting to talk about. Because as the league gets bigger and bigger, there's going to be more fresh faces than there are experienced ones. But yeah, for me, I think in general, the GBHL is a massive force for good. They've pushed the game. GBHL events seem to be much better attended. And I do like the fact that, if you want to do a GBHL 100, all right, show us you can do an 80 or a 90 first. I think that's good. I think you're more Like, not to put down non-GBHL events, because my experience is limited there. I'm sure there's some people putting on some banging events independently. But I do think you've got that reassurance, and I would encourage new players to probably go to GBHL 80s.
So when you did the Warhammer one with Chris, was that a GBHL? Or
no, that wasn't a GBHL event.
So,
I mean, that was ran very, very good. I didn't hear of there needing to be any rules enforcement stuff. But there were plenty of TOs around. Organisation was really good. I don't think I did a scoring thing on that, but if we had, it would have done very well.
Yeah.
It was. So
what do you expect from
the Warhammer World Events team? I think, it's up there with the best GBHL events. And from what I've heard, they don't care who you are. They don't care what your name is. They don't care where you've placed before. If you go beyond the rules, they will enforce it from what I've heard. That doesn't seem to be an issue at all there because, it's someone doing their job. They're literally being paid for it. They're going to do it in an impassive, professional way. Not to put the GBHL down there because people are doing it for free. And
they're doing... The people that are doing it are obviously doing a good job and everyone's enjoying tournaments. I've not had a tournament where I've come away and gone, I'm not playing in a GBHL event anymore. Yeah, the point I'm just making is that when you're being paid for it and it's literally your job, you're going to be more diligent. You're going to do things more by the book. You and I have both probably had situations at work where it's been look, I'm not putting the liability of blame on me. I'm going to do it as my manager says. Yeah.
And as he's written the rules or whatever. But so that is, GBHL, good thing, I think, on the whole. You agree with
I
that?
agree. I think it's good to have that.
Yeah.
Because if we didn't have the GBHL, would we have a league of any sort? Because I don't think there's a want from the guys at Game Workshop to have a league like what we have.
No. I do think they are mostly responsible for the game still existing in its current form, with albeit limited support, but the fact they are still at least putting out rules, I think that's because of the GBHL. I think the fact we're doing this podcast, we're attending tournaments, it's all thanks to the GBHL.
Yeah, I think so. And I saw some stupid stat that 40%, 46%, I think, of stock is out of stock.
Yeah.
For Middle-earth stuff. So
you are determined to get onto further topics here, Ash. we'll get onto them in a bit.
No, but what I'm saying is there doesn't seem the support from Games Workshop, but the GBHL are obviously enticing people to keep playing the game.
Yeah, I genuinely think if all support were to be pulled, I would really be worried about player-made rule packs, creating the rules. And I think there would be competition. I think you would be one lot of people in one place saying this is the rules and the other. I think that would be terrible unless everybody just said, all right, we'll freeze the rules as they are. I wouldn't look forward to player-made rules. But I do think that the community could more than survive. I don't think GBHL events would stop if Games Workshop support disappeared. At least for the next 5 years. Who knows what would happen? Maybe license goes somewhere else or whatever in 5 years.
Maybe with this whole Amazon agreement with the 40k and fantasy film series, maybe there's something in the pipeline for the Lord of the Rings.
I hadn't thought about that.
I know you don't like that series on Amazon, but it might be inject some new enthusiasm and models into the hobby.
I absolutely slated it when I talked about it. There's no ambiguity there. But okay, so that's the GBHO, everything covered. So I think that's been cool to get your opinion on that. So the next thing is more sort of introspective. How have you, as a player, have you developed from January to January? Because for me, I felt there was a big change in how I approached games, how I played games, and especially some of the tactics I employed.
Yeah, I think I'm a lot more strategic in my games. And I think more of what the objective is for the game over just wanting to smash my opponent off the table.
Yeah.
I do concentrate a lot more on what the objective is for the game and play the objective and not the player. I think that's the biggest thing that I've changed is instead of playing the player or playing the army I'm playing, it's play the objective and play the objective to the strengths of my list and not necessarily the weaknesses of my opponent's list.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing I've developed playing tournaments as a player. And I think I've grown a better love for the game as well.
Yeah.
Because playing in a small, like we've got a small circle, it can get quite repetitive in terms of the games. And we've talked earlier today about how do we improve that for us so that we're playing more games with more variety. So I think, getting that experience playing other lists and that variety sort of keeps you interested in the game. Because I think it could become... It's one of those games where if you play in the same army in the same list, it can become very repetitive.
Yeah. It can play out very similar in the vast majority of scenarios.
I think because there's only a limited amount of scenarios.
Yeah.
When you look at 40k and Kill Team now,
it is countless.
There's a lot of scenarios and the objectives change because you're drawing objective cards.
I think maybe not like, we're getting rid of the tournament pack, but being like, okay, we have a tournament pack too.
Yeah.
Just so there's more variety. I think that would be good. But I guess to do that properly, they probably need to do quite a bit of games testing is maybe the reason that hasn't been done.
I think maybe introducing some, like when we've gone to tournaments where they've sort of introduced the secondary objectives with the cards.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea. That in the next rule update is having maybe some objective cards or something that you can draw per game to sort of add that secondary sort of element to the game.
I do think like having some, especially if they could, like for each army, having like themed secondary objectives. I think like you have in many other games, because it makes it more things to think about.
Yeah.
And more challenging for players that have maybe got used to their army. Like, maybe like Rohan could have some sort of like overrun, like I don't know, wind up with, because like they're a cavalry force, they're driving up thing, wind up with so many models in your opponent's deployment zone, like you get in 40k.
Yeah,
I think that could be cool. It would take a lot of thought and a lot of work to do it properly, but I think spicing up the competitive scene a bit, especially when you're not getting releases to force the meta to change.
Yeah,
I think that could be a good, cost-effective way for them.
Maybe that's an idea where you push.
I don't know how we
heard it here first.
Okay, so we've spoken about pretty much everything in review there. So that's been the year in review. I think we've pretty much done everything. We're maybe at the end, depending on how long we're running, we'll talk about Games Workshop support, the fair play thing that we keep batting around. But let's look at your year moving forwards. So I guess there's a number of questions there, like, what are your aspirations in terms of tournaments? Are there particular ones you want to attend? Do you want to do a higher number, lesser number, new year, new army? How are you feeling on everything? Lay it out for us, Ash.
Yeah, so I think new year, new army. I'm not quite sure on the army just yet. I have to do thinking. Maybe have a look at maybe doing an evil army because I've got my good army. Maybe Easterlings or some form of Mordor list. I think tournament-wise, maybe similar amount. I think we sort of got a good medium of how many we did. It wasn't like every weekend. It wasn't like...
I think I did
too many, yeah.
I think I did 6 across the year.
Yeah, I think... Was there one?
There was
one I didn't attend to, wasn't there? So 5 or 6, I think, is a good number for us to do. Maybe a couple more if we get the time.
I'd like to bump the number up to maybe 8 or 10. I can't see myself finding the time to do more than that.
Because we've obviously 10th coming out with 40k, and I quite like how 10th is sort of played at the minute. I'd like to play more of an even mix of Middle-earth and 10th 40k. So, I think 6 maybe is a good aim for me.
Yeah.
Just to get out a bit on the weekends and play those games. Maybe mainly 90s and 80s, I think.
Yeah.
Might try 100 if it sounds like a good one and it's in a good location. But new army, I think. Play more games. Not just every so often, but play more games maybe every couple of weeks and stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe go and find a local club to go and play games at. But yeah, definitely play more games, try different lists within our games to see which one suits before just diving straight into a certain list.
So any thought, before we delve into some of the stuff we've been talking about, like more games and games clubs and stuff, any ideas on armies? Because I've got a couple of ideas for armies for you if you were open.
I do like the Dragon Emperor list. But that's, again, I'm trying not to go down the theme list like I did last time. I went with Rohan because I like the theme. I like that it's like a mix of like Viking, Saxon sort of theme. And they are like one of my favourite aspects of the trilogy.
The Easterlings are Viking Saxon?
No,
what do you mean?
The Rohan.
Oh, Rohan, sorry.
But then I really like the Easterlings because it's like that Oriental samurai.
Scale armour and all that. Yeah.
But I don't want to go down that. I want to go down something that's competitive, and I think Dragon Emperor is competitive, but I don't want to just limit myself. So
the thing that
I think try a few armies on Tabletop Simulator maybe and see what I sort of gel with.
Yeah, one of the things that puts me off about the Dragon Emperor is like I've obviously got a lot of things going on this year in terms of trying to move house and family plans and things like that. And there's only so much I can spend on the hobby, and I really don't want to spend like 130 quid with the Black Dragon dismounts on the Forge World model, because that's probably for like models that's probably 25%, if not more, of my entire budget for the year. And then if I buy a proxy, I can't because I've got many of the other models, like I've got the cataphracts, I've got the infantry, there's not a lot more I need to buy. It would mean I'd have a whole army, which because of one model, I can't take to GW or Ardacon events, and that would suck. That's one of the things that puts me off. It's a very expensive model.
I always do spend a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we always wind up spending more than we mean. But
I just wish they'd stop bringing out Dark Angels in 40k, and then I'd stop being so tempted by that.
Yeah.
So it's like they push us with these drugs every week to just keep buying new stuff.
Well, it's don't think about painting them, don't think about playing on them, just consume.
Yeah.
Just buy more models. That is their business practice. I mean, they can't do it any other way, do they? They need us to keep buying stuff.
Yeah.
But on to some ideas I had for maybe possible armies. So, like, just giving you an idea of some of the ones I was thinking. So I'll pick up on my desk here. I know the listeners can't see, but I've been working on my Witch King of Angmar on Fellbeast made to order. Because I'm going to do a Mordor list, basically because I only need to paint about half the army. Need to do the Witch King. I've got some Black Numenorians on the way, and some Morgul Stalkers, and then I've got everything else for the army. So relatively low cost because I've got these things.
Yeah, I guess I've got the Witch King on Fellbeast from Plenor Fields box set, and I've got some more Morannon Orcs. Well, the one
I was going to get at is maybe a Helm's Guards list. Because I think that is maybe not at 100 event, but I think that's quite a competitive list that you could use like half your army.
Yeah.
You can have Riders of Rohan in it. You can have Royal Guard in it. You obviously got all the dismounts. All you'd really need to add is Grimbold, and then paint some guys with maybe red shields or something as Helmingas. I'm not sure how they're identified, which they get strength 4. And you basically get to use all your throwing spears as spears when you're in the shield wall.
Yeah.
So that's a more flexible.
I need to buy Helm Hammerhand as well for that list.
No. Sorry, I said Helmsguard, didn't I? Theodred's Guard.
I
meant Theodred's Guard. That's a really interesting horde list because Theodred on a horse, I think, costs like 90 or 95 points. And yeah, you need to surround him to make sure he doesn't charge because he always charges. But then you can have Grimbold to access the strength 4 guys. So you've got defense 5 across the board, which is really points efficient. You can possibly have strength 4 across the board, which is really good. You've got spears, you've got throwing spears. It's like maybe ultimate spear wall is going too far, but a very strong spear wall because you've got those throwing spears.
Yeah.
I think that's a cool list, one to consider because like with my Mordor list, you only really need to do half an army. So that was an idea I thought for you. The other one I thought about is Ash has recently got a 3D printer, so I'm trying to encourage him to basically print a Arnor list for both him and me, because I think that could be...
So recently, I've had it since April
last
year. So
he's barely touched it.
It's still in... I've still got the washer in the box.
If it was a pet, it would have died of neglect. But yeah, I've been trying to push that because I think that could be... Yeah, we can't take it to GW endorsed events, but I'm not paying the insane amounts of money it would take to get a second-hand one.
Yeah.
I think Arnor could be cool. Like, we did play that in a practice game, didn't we?
Yeah,
it's got some interesting mechanics.
It's got some interesting mechanics, and I think if you ever come up against Angmar, sorry.
Yeah.
It's quite powerful because it's got that hatred rule. It's limited on mobility because it's all people on foot.
Yeah.
I think I do like the idea of a Men of the West list as well. I think that's quite cool.
I don't think it's very good, but yeah. That could be a fun one to play.
Aragorn acting as a banner, giving +1 fight skill.
Yeah, that could be cool at 80s,
I think I'd like to do something new. Get out of the Rohan sort of theme. So,
well, on the topic of something new, we've spoken about playing more games and with new people and stuff. So one of the things me and Ash are going to... It's primarily to run a kill team campaign that we want to run every 2 weeks. But the important part of it is we're intending to meet up at least twice a month to play games. And we've been batting the idea around of maybe if we played Lord of the Rings, every time we played Lord of the Rings, you've got to bring a different army. Even if it's proxying in, I think that's one of the things that's been missing from our practice.
Yeah, I think so. I think because we've just stuck to our go-to lists, I think, we just need to mix that up and get ready for the first tournament we go to, and hopefully by then we've decided on a list. Yeah,
I mean, I think even just being like, there's plenty of armies that I struggle to think of any I haven't played. I'm sure there's one or two. But even if you've played the one army once, I think just being like, all right, I'm going to copy that list and I'm going to play a game against Sonny with that list, and then playing it once, I think your knowledge of that list would skyrocket just off that one game. It would make such a difference.
Yeah.
Just because of the way that how initial learning...
You look into the rules more as well, and you think, well, I'd play this rule this way, so...
So that's something we're going to do. I think we've really been like, let's just get super at this list. But, it's the Sun Tzu thing, isn't it? Like, know your enemy better than you know yourself.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that is naively part of the equation we've missed. And we can't just wait for those armies to turn up. I think we need to play them at home.
Yeah, I think so. Because that'll prevent you from sort of that got your feeling.
Yeah.
Because you've played that list, you know the rule set behind the list. Someone's not going to come and pop out a stupid rule that does a stupid thing and puts you off your game a bit. So, I think definitely worth sticking with that plan. And
the other thing that Ash mentioned is we're thinking about we are going to go play at some games clubs. So we've got Bedworth on our table, on our doorstep, and we've also got Tamworth, which is an area I'm thinking about moving to. There's a games club there. There's some guys I go to work with that attend there. So hopefully sooner rather than later, but maybe it winds up being a midway through the year thing, depending on how my move goes. But we're looking to attend a gaming club and make that more of a regular thing for us, and engage with the local scene rather than being totally isolated in our little.
I think maybe there's a few scenes as well around Birmingham that aren't too far because there's a local shop. Yeah, I think we've just got to stop being a little bit lazy and get out there and be a bit more social. Well, there's no reason we can't. Like, I've been in that WhatsApp group for ages for Bedworth. There's no reason we can't just be like, oh, there's two of us coming. Can we get a game going? And I think that will help our learning astronomically. I do think it's something. Like, we've been so focused on let's attend more tournaments and let's do practice games for tournaments with those armies, but I just think we've left the social side behind a bit, and we haven't really focused on, well, how can we play more games locally?
More games,
not necessarily play more tournaments, but how do we play
more games, more variables?
Yeah.
Like, I think even just playing scenario games, just being like, all right, this is a situation that doesn't come up very often. What can we learn from that? I think we are continuing to learn, but we could be learning twice as much in the same amount of time.
Yeah,
I guess.
And we're missing the aspect of like we're looking at with Kill Team. We're doing that crusade where it's 48 missions across the year. We're missing that aspect of Middle Earth as well, where we're not really playing those sort of theme games that also add that extra layer of learning because you're playing in a scenario that's more of a themed scenario.
I think if we join the club as well, who knows, maybe somebody's running an escalation league or something like that. Do you know what that is?
Yeah,
where you start out at 200 and then the next game's 400. And the idea is basically, new year, new army in a league format of, right, everybody's got to turn up with 200 points painted, and by the end, you're playing 800-point games. Yeah. And there's a league that goes with it to encourage people to play. I think that would be right up our street.
Yeah, I think so.
If they're running that twice a month, that's something we could possibly fit in. Yeah, the individual meetups would have to be sacrificed a bit, but we could do that. Yeah. So I'm really hopeful for the next year. Like, just going to continue to develop, and I think there was a bit mid-year. It felt like almost a bit of a lull in terms of enjoyment. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think because we didn't have that other focus, because we were sort of, there's no point playing 40k because we hated 9th.
Yeah.
We sort of started getting into Kill Team a little bit.
Yeah.
I think around that point. And then obviously we had this injection of 10th, and it's sort of, we've had that step away a bit, I guess, from the hobby.
Yeah. It has been.
We've had a lot of stuff happening personally, and
yeah,
it's just been crazy. Whereas this year, sort of my resolution is at least get all of my Space Marines painted in 40k, start a new Middle Earth army, just generally do more hobbying in a whole.
I think more games, more fun. Like playing Kill Team, where we're both completely naff at it. We're probably the worst Kill Team players in the world because it's a brand new game to us, and it's been liberating because I don't care if I win or lose. And that, I am a competitive person, but I do think I need to be like, who cares? Let's just put a list together. I want to see Boromir doing some cool things. I want to be like screaming because I've duffed the dice or whatever. Let's just have fun with it. And I do think that there's learning as a competitive player to be done there as well, of taking it less seriously in the practice games.
Go back to the roots of why you joined the hobby, and it's to have fun with your mates rolling dice.
And we've always played 40k and Kill Team for fun, never competitively. And I think that's one of the things that's
and maybe that's what took away the enjoyment of the Middle Earth, is we started going to these tournaments and we wanted to, because we're both competitive people, we want to win and we want to go to these things and do well.
Yeah, I guess what we're getting at there is that the practice, the learning, doesn't have to be serious.
Yeah. I think even at a tournament, though.
Yeah.
I've had the best games where I've just sort of, it's the end of the day, I know I'm not in the contention to win, and I've just sat back and just enjoyed the game.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. But I mean, the only thing I would hold back on saying there is that, like, when I was at Grantham, when I got to game 3 and I'm unbeaten, and game 4 and I'm unbeaten. Like, game 4 was really chill. I forget the chap's name, but it was a really nice game. We're both playing competitively, but you can't, if you do want to do well and it's that tight a margin, you can't turn off.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. You can be relaxed, but you can't turn off.
Yeah, don't turn off, but just enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I think that is a good perspective for the next year. Like, I'm excited for it. This hobby is so great. There's other things I want to be getting up to during the year, but this is certainly one of them, and I'm going to continue to make time for it. So I think we've got time for maybe a couple more topics, and then we're going to wrap it up, because we were intending about an hour. We're at about an hour now, so we'll give ourselves maybe 20 minutes absolute maximum. Maybe we'll cut it short, but we'll see how we go. So one more, I think we've got time for one more topic, really, because we want to play some games of Kill Team after this. Not Lord of the Rings, I'm sorry. this afternoon, but we're doing something a bit different. But yeah, so one of the topics that has been sort of a theme for the podcast for a few episodes, and we will put this down and we'll move on to other things at some point, but it's something we're going to circle back round to, because I think it's something me and Ash are both quite passionate about, is the idea of sportsmanship and fair play, because the fact this game needs to be played in a spirit of goodwill, else it becomes horrible. Like, we've all had those games where the other person hasn't had the same intent, and it's just like, especially if you're not playing for a podium finish or a top 5 finish, we've all felt like just being like, if it's that important to you, mate, take the 12-0. I don't want to finish the game. I haven't ever done that, but I've certainly felt it. Now, yeah, so we're going to delve into that. We're not going to go into the Ardacon and things. We've spoken about that more than enough, and I don't think Ash's view is too far removed from mine.
No, I think it's quite similar.
Yeah, we came to a similar consensus. We've spoken about that in our own time. But I do think that there is, and this is why I want to get Ash's view on it, because he's a fresh player. This is his first year in it. And as I've mentioned earlier, the league has expanded to 1,500 players. If it expands at the same rate, we're going to be looking at 2,000 next year. Maybe it could grow astronomically. We really don't know. I would expect that it would continue to grow at a rate, because you've got more people telling their friends about it, and it just spreads and spreads and spreads. And as more people come in, more people are going to come in. They're going to have fresh opinions. They're not going to be part of the existing social groups. And if the people that are the current centre now don't shift, they could very well find themselves in the minority opinion in 5 years. So I think it is always important to listen to new people coming in. Just like if you're at work and you hire someone, if you don't listen to them and their opinion, and you say, "Look, you're new, you don't get to have an opinion on it," they will go somewhere else, or in this case, they'll set up their own club. And that's how things could fracture. Look at 40k. There's many different tournament organisations, and we probably don't want that, because it's great that we all play in the same place. So I'm going to make a pitch, and then I'm going to let Ash talk, because you guys have heard me talk on this a lot. You don't need to hear more of the same opinions. I'm going to get into his, but my general opinion is that there does need to be some coordination in terms of across the board rules enforcement at tournaments, because a lot of it is very dependent on the TO. And I know that is just a byproduct of the way that the TO does need to be responsible for the tournament. But sometimes I've heard about quite large differences of opinion in terms of interpretation of the rules, and particularly when games end. And in cases of things being escalated, I honestly haven't heard of any situations where anything has been done about it. I can't think of any. I've heard many stories about things going wrong, nothing about anything being done about it. And I do think that is meant to be one of the key attractions of the GBHL. So for that not to be a visible part of it in a transparent way, which I think is important for people to see that justice, quotation marks, has been done, I do think that's something that's lacking. And I do think this attitude of, "Oh, I've played that person," or "I know that person," or "They're from my local games club." I do think that from my perspective, for new players, from myself and others coming in, it does appear that rules enforcement can sometimes be quite cliquey. Of, "Oh no, they know what they're doing." I've actually had people that are friends with the person I'm playing lean over and be like, "Oh, I was a TO at a different event. I'm friends with them. They're telling you the truth." And I'm like, "Well, you're not working at this event." And I think that's an example. So that's my pitch. That's sort of my opinion. Ash, have at it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think on that last point, I've had similar experiences.
Mm.
So one that sticks out to me is at the last tournament we went to, we were playing a game where it was, is it Lords of Battle, where you have to you get points for killing enemy models.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, having Rohan, you then get points for killing the rider and the horse. And the guy was rolling to kill the rider, killing him, and then having some dice left, he then rolled to kill the horse.
Yeah, which you can't do.
And which you can't do. You have to kill the horse first and then the rider. So I questioned it and said, no, I think you have to kill the horse first. He was like, no, the rule is I get to decide when I do what. Mm-hmm. He had a friend lean over and said, yeah, he's that's the way it should be played. In experience.
Just interact, which may not even been malicious. That may just be how they play it at home.
Yeah, that could be how they play it at home, but it might not have been. And from what I've been told about that person, it was probably more the latter.
Okay.
And even though I think I've got a good relationship with Tom, who was the TO for the tournament, as a new player, I still didn't feel that comfortable in saying, no, let's just hold the game a minute. Can I just get the TO because I think that's wrong? Mm-hmm. So there's a bit of badness on my behalf because I should have stopped being a little baby and actually just stood up for myself. Yeah. But then it's like you feel cheated out of the game when you then ask people and ask the TO after, is this how this rule should be played? So, but even then I still think, well, that's a learning experience for me. I know how to play that rule. I can question it in the future. And I can say, no, this is how it should be played. Pull the TO over. Again, a similar situation where I spoke out a bit before was I had a line of Royal Guard, 3 riders across, 3 riders deep, and I always put my banner and Fearden behind them. Yeah, because they're protected. And the guy shot through and he said, no, I've got line of sight because I can see through all the horses. To get to your banner, I don't need to roll in the waves. Again, he was wearing an England top from playing in an England tournament. So as a new player, you don't feel quite comfortable with questioning him because you think, oh, well, he's experienced, he knows what he's doing. Yeah. And then when you speak to people after, they're like, no, that should have in the ways. And you think, oh, God, you kick yourself a bit for not questioning it. So I think you do see as well, like, a lot of certain players who tend to have the problems, they're turning up to tournaments, they're very pally-pally with the TO. I think because the scene is so small, that's obviously quite hard to avoid.
So going back to that top experience with that experience with that top player. I mean, how did that make you feel? Is that something that could have realistically put you off at future tournaments, or is that overplaying it? Like how, just expand on that. Try and put yourself in.
Put me off playing 100 again. Yeah. But then that sort of issue was then compounded at that tournament because it turned out we submitted our scores. The TO put me down as winning. When I didn't, I lost. So then I ended up having to play a list I wasn't meant to play. And then ended up playing that list 3 times in the same weekend. And it's just like, if that mistake from the TO hadn't happened, I probably maybe would have then gone on and maybe played someone I could have possibly won against. And it could have changed my position in the tournament. And then when you raised it with the TO, he said, okay, well, I'll move you down because you should have lost, and I'll kick you out of the group you're in. And then I ended up in the bottom group. And
on that specific instance, because we're doing 2 things there. There's the top player instant, and then there's the TO. There's somebody I know who is now one of the regional reps for the GBHL. In fairness, he did suggest that you complain to the GBHL about that TO experience. Yeah. So who knows? You didn't decide to do that. So just in fairness, to them, something may or may not have been done about that. We don't.
Yeah, know. But I can't comment on what the GBHL would have done there. Yeah. And TOs have it hard. They've got to manage a lot of people, and I think from what we've seen at those tournaments, there is certain players who want the TO sitting on their table and making judgments on every single rule. And I think again, because this is a community, a lot of people built on a lot of people having friendships. I think when you go to a tournament, the TO will know a lot of people at that tournament because that's how he's sort of advertised it. Is he's gone to his friends and said, or the local gaming club he maybe plays for, "Oh, I'm going to run a tournament. Do you fancy coming?" And that's how it gets there. And then you hear other stories like with the dice down play on rule where someone at the top table, they're best friends with the TO or they're friends with the TO and the TO's ruled in their favour because they're sort of, well, they can't accuse people of being favouritism, but it seems sometimes there is that element in there, which human instinct, why wouldn't you sort of favour your friend over someone you don't really know?
But it does, I mean, that is the point, is that people who are in charge of rules enforcement, whether it's at the GBHL or at a tournament, that they need to be passive on that. They need to look at the information that is available to them. Okay, I've got these two, I've got, this person that's been accused of this. I've got this person doing the accusing. Do I have any witnesses? What did what did the accused person say? What did the accuser say? What have I got on the table in front of me? It needs to be evidence-based, doesn't it? It goes without saying for it to
and I think
have any benefit.
You could sort of maybe an enforcement could be you have an independent rules official that comes for the tournament that isn't from that local club, maybe.
That would obviously carry cost, but
I think you got to remember these people are doing it for free.
Well, one of the things...
They're not going to maybe be as stringent, like you say, if they'd done it, if they were doing it and they were paid and it was like a bit of a side job that they were doing.
Well, one of the things that so on the last podcast, I shared a video by a chap called Stephen Box, who I think you know of, does the Vanguard Tactics stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously that's 40k, but when I haven't liked everything he's ever said, and I'm not sure we would even get on if we met. If I'm being honest,
but I think he is a big advocate for fair play.
Yeah, he is a massive advocate.
40k because 40k is known as that really sweaty gaming.
Yeah, I'm just saying he's maybe not even my kind of person, but I do think he says a lot of sense on fair play. And basically, he did this interview and he was talking about the standard of fair play he holds himself to. And he gave an example of where he played a rule wrong innocently on a new army he was using. And he found out in game 4 of a 6-game tournament. And he went to the TO and said, "I have played this rule wrong for the last 4 games. I want you to nullify my tournament points because we don't know what effect it could have had." And what some of the things he was suggesting, which I think could possibly be good for Middle-earth and would get rid of a lot of the concerns we've discussed here, is he sort of suggested, okay, if you've got an opponent and you say to them, "Oh, you've played that rule wrong," like with the horses, like say you got on top of that and you're like, "You played that rule wrong." At the end of the game, you just go to the TO and you say to them, "Look, I don't want to cause a fuss about it, but just for your rules notebook or enforcement notebook, this player played this rule wrong. Just so you know, I think it was innocent, but you can note that down." So that if that comes up again, they've been corrected. Yeah. There is a hard record of, "Oh, that person did that there." And then maybe that record can be transferred to the GBHL. And if that comes up at another tournament, you can be like, "Wait, hang on. That player was corrected on that rules infringement at this tournament 2 weeks ago.
They're still playing it wrong."
Yeah, they're still playing it wrong. And the same for, anything really. If somebody is consistently being accused of slow play, if somebody is consistently getting ties against people they know when it's preferable for them, you can take out the ambiguity on all these situations by making it evidence-based. And I thought that was a good idea. I haven't spoken to you about it. What do you think?
I think as well in 40k, Stephen Box, his I guess, livelihood is made from 40k. And these guys are getting, the tournaments they're paying in, they're winning prize money. So for him to go at the end and say, "I've played this rule wrong," that's sort of affecting his livelihood, if you like, and there's a lot more at stake in those games.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Middle-earth, it's not really that deep, because if you win the league, I don't know, what do you get for winning the league? Just the trophy.
Yeah.
So, you get that pride and that good feeling, but it's not that deep at the end of the day. And I think, if people keep consistently breaking rules and someone spoke to them and said, this is how you're meant to play this rule, you've broken it in this game, you sort of on a warning, and if it consistently happens at other tournaments, then that person needs to be brought up on it.
Yeah,
from a higher level, I guess. And
I think in a world where, like, I've never heard anybody talk about the gaming community we have and be like, oh, it's toxic, it's terrible, whatever. Everybody, including us, says the vast majority of people out there are great. So I do think if there was some kind of record like this of, oh, it's just been mentioned, without accusation, it would create a system of there's no smoke without fire. If you consistently having someone accused of something by this lovely community, you've either then got to be like, all right, is there a vendetta against them? All right, if it's a vendetta, is there evidence of that?
Yeah, because if it's getting to that point where it's at that top competitive level, and second place and first place, one of them is getting complained about a lot by somebody.
Yeah.
Do those people have ties with the top place person and they just want to prevent that person from taking the top spot? But
you could figure that out quite quickly by... We all have to use Facebook for the tournaments. You could see who people's common friends are. You could see who they're hanging out with. Like, a little bit of investigation could make this system almost foolproof. And I just thought it was a really good idea that, and I think I'm going to start doing it. And I'm going to encourage people to do it. Is if something goes wrong, without accusation, just mention it to the TO. It's something I'm going to start doing. And I'm going to try and make sure every tournament, both for my education and the benefit of the other player, because they're probably a lovely player who doesn't want to cheat anyone. If I'm in doubt about a rule, I'm going to call the TO over so we can both learn and get it correct.
Yeah. And it sounds like if they don't start doing something like that, Middle-earth could end up being like how 40k was before people like Stephen Box and other people started being more advocates for fair play, and the rules started being enforced more, and it was a lot less.
And and I don't. We're not like a cesspit like 40k was accused of being at one point. I do think this is great, but as I said on a previous podcast, why can't it be even better? Like, let's not just maintain, let's continue to make this the best place in the world to play Middle-earth strategy battle game. And one of the things that I recently saw in an interview that actually concerns me a bit is the attitude of some people of like almost suggesting that people like me and Ash shouldn't have the right to an opinion on this kind of stuff. Like, it was actually ironically the player, we're not going to name names on it, but the player you were talking about with the Rohan situation.
Okay.
I saw an interview with him, and he basically said, like, why are other people in the community, other players that aren't top players, having opinions on the conduct of top players? It's nothing to do with you.
But everyone's due to an opinion.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously 40k got that bad rap, but look at the numbers of people who play 40k versus Middle-earth. You're bound to have less crappy people because you've got less people. Well, it's like you see it in society where there's a certain minority of people. Some of that minority misbehave. The whole of that minority gets labelled as horrible. You see it all the time, but the bigger that number of people, the more you're going to have that minority. But then people just focus on that minority, and we don't want the game to go that way.
I also think as well, like, it's a very backwards way of thinking that maybe because you don't have a chance of winning the league, that you shouldn't have an opinion on the top players. Because, like, if we look at sport, which this is, it's a league, it's competition. If we look at sport, the top players, the top drivers, the top teams, they lead the way in terms of conduct for everybody else, because you've then got those mid-tier players who are like, oh, I want to be top tier, so I'm going to do that. If that's what it takes to get an advantage, I'm going to do that. Then you've got the lower tier players, where we probably sit, being like, oh, that was done to me, that's unfair, I'm not going to go to a GBHL 100 like you said.
Yeah.
Or, oh, is that what it takes to compete? I'm going to do it, and so on. Like, I think a good example was, like, me and Ash are both fans of the NFL. Look at with Philadelphia with the brotherly shove or whatever it is, do it on the 1 yard line. Like, everybody's doing it. Everybody's being like, oh, this is poor sportsmanship. This is rubbish. I don't like it. Everybody's doing it because there's an advantage in it. And those top people, like, they shouldn't be coming out with comments like that. They should be encouraging new people to come into the game because it makes it more competitive. Well, I don't think they were discouraging new people. They were just basically being
you don't have an opinion.
You're not in the you're not in the top 20. You're nowhere near the title race. Why have you got an opinion on it? But the other thing is like, you know, in Premier League, you've got the person in the title race, you've got the person in the relegation race. They still play each other twice a year. You've played top players. I've played top players. We've still got to play them.
Yeah.
And we still
look at the country. Like, if we said, only top 20% of earners can comment on how much tax everyone pays.
Yeah.
Everyone at the bottom is going to be like, no, you can. So
yeah, a league is all of its constituent parts. It's not just the top 10%. And I think conduct, particularly, I think conduct at the top tables is probably the most important place to place attention on sportsmanship. And yeah, I mean, I've seen a couple of other publications suggest that this person at the top is what's called, you know, the example of fair play.
Yeah.
And maybe they are sometimes when they're playing against certain people. But I actually thought with that Stephen Box interview, it's the first time I've been like, wow, that is a level of sportsmanship above what I would do.
Yeah, because he's ranked to quite a high top player in the league, but you don't just see it with him. Like, the guy who owns Glasshammer Gaming, like, you see interviews with him or how he talks, and he's like, they're all those top players in 40k. They're becoming the advocates for fair play, and that trickles down. So
I mean,
we sort of look to the top players and say, "Come on, take what we're saying and listen." Be those role models.
I mean, I have had rules corrected, and I didn't go and say, look, I want you to take tournament points off me, or I want you to disallow them. I didn't do that. I just was like, all right, I'm going to fix this. And maybe it is extreme, but I do think if you are going to be held up as an example of fair play, maybe you have got to be extreme. And it's the first time I've thought, okay, I can better myself. I can be more sportsmanly. I can have... You know, if that happens in future, and I think it's affected the games, I'm going to go talk to the TO.
And I think you'd get a lot more respect. Maybe not in this community by the sounds of it, but
no, I think
if you're at the top, you would get more respect from the people who are looking up to be the top players.
No, I disagree about the respect. I like the feedback I got from talking about the controversy. Most people were thinking exactly like we are.
Yeah.
It's just that. I do think that there's some people that are doing what it takes to win. And what Stephen did, like saying disavow those games, integrity with a capital I. Being that is putting your money where your mouth is, of sacrificing your performance because it's more important to you to be a good sportsman.
Person, good sportsman, yeah. And at the end of the day, that's what life is about. If you end up in a grave, if you've been a good person, that's what people remember that. They don't remember how many tournaments you've won it in Middle Earth.
Well, you know, we can all have our aims. I want to win a tournament. Whether people talk about it after I'm dead or not, it isn't really important.
No, I don't think they'll be talking about you in a nice way. But
it's a hobby. But yeah, I think how you win it and what kind of player you are is far more important than just winning it.
I would rather go to a tournament and lose a couple of games, but know I've played the game for fun and I've been a nice person and I've stuck to my morals of fair play.
Well, I can't imagine going to an event and walking away with a prize, or a member of my team walking away with a prize, or whatever, you know, have helped in a non-okay way, and not looking at that and being like, God, that's an example of me not at my best. What value is there in that? And I think that's a good chat on this topic, and something for us to all think about and aspire to. And like I said last time when we was talking about the Stephen Box thing, really interested to know your thoughts on this. Write to us at middleearthinmercia@gmail.com. You can also message us on Facebook. Me and Ash both have Instagram. I'm at Lord of Hykra. That's Hykra is spelt Hy. I need to remember RKA. Ash, what's your Instagram?
At Filthy Northerner.
And that's probably spelled wrong because he's from the north. But yeah, you can find all our latest hobby progress on there. But if you do have any thoughts on this chat or anything we've been over, really interested to hear from you all. It's nice to open a dialogue rather than this just be a bubble. But I think we've got an interesting perspective there from Ash. He's a new player, you know. I think this is the most important perspective in terms of the community growing. Like we've said, if we get 500 new people, that's possibly 500 people thinking the way Ash is thinking about certain things. And sometimes it does take someone to come in with a new perspective and be like, all right, we didn't mean for things to get like this. We didn't mean for it to be interpreted like that. But it's like like what they say about communication. It's not just about what you say. It's about how it's heard. And if the person on the other end is hearing something different than what you intended to say, your communication is failing. And I do think that is a point to take home really from here. Like Ash has said directly, there's a couple of things I'd be put off going to. And I think that's really bad. I mean, I felt bad because I was the one that encouraged us to go to the GBHL 100 and I wanted us all to have a good time. And I think the chances of us going to another one, unless it's got a cool hook, like you said, Ash, are probably quite low. So that's a shame. And if someone's more timid or they've, maybe not got a circle of friends like us to go with, maybe that feeling would be stronger. I know for others it might be water off a duck's back, but there you go. So any closing thoughts, Ash, before we wrap this one up?
No, yeah, I just think we're coming, as the hobby grows, we could start to see anarchy and maybe a competitive league against the GBHL if we're not too careful. Some of the biggest things in history have always been caused by someone having an opposing view and branching out. So we could maybe see that league, and I think that would be bad because the hobby in scale of relativeness is quite small. Having that fractured one league and another league might just make it not as competitive in a sense. But
it would be a shame to see. And just in case anybody gets suspicious to head off, we're in no way going to start another league. We don't have time for that. Or the
I don't have time for that. I don't have time for this podcast.
There is zero chance of that happening, in case anybody thought that was a suggestion. We'd like to run a tournament at some point, but I think we're going to take about 2 years of planning for us to do that.
We might get declined now.
I don't think on paper we've done anything wrong. We've just got opinions. But yeah, all right. So thank you, everyone. I think that's been a really good chat. We're going to go have some food now and play a few games. And as I always say, I hope you find some time for the hobby and some time to roll some dice out there. Ash, anything to say?
No, just catch you all later, guys.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Bye.